Welcome back, guys. So in the last video, we have seen how to set up MySQL uh, server and launch the MySQL server, and we also run a small query of how to show the databases. Okay. So in this particular video, we will connect your Python programming language, your Python software, Python connector to your MySQL and run all the database operations, all the CRUD operations. In order to do that, in order to connect your Python to your database, to MySQL database management system, you can use a library actually. We have a library called as MySQL connector. Okay, we have a library called as MySQL connector. So we can use this particular library in order to connect your Python to your database. So first let's install this particular library. So this particular library will also help us to connect MySQL and also few non-MySQL database DBMS systems also. Okay. So now as we are using MySQL DBMS, so we are using this particular library. So let's start using this. Let's first install this. So in order to install this particular MySQL connector, you can just go to Google and you can just search for the command. Okay, so you can just say MySQL connector and you can just say pip. Okay, MySQL connector Python, MySQL connector Python space pip. So if we just say like this, you'll be getting the very first link, MySQL connector Python py. Go to this particular repository and you'll be getting the command. So you should use this particular command in order to install the MySQL connector. So you'll be using this particular version right now. So you can just copy this particular command. You can just click on this to copy this particular command. And you can open your Anaconda prompt or your command prompt in administrator mode, right? And you can run this particular command. So if you just run this particular command, this particular library, MySQL connector Python will be installed, which you can use it for connecting your Python to your database. Okay. So in my system, already I'm having the library. So it is showing as a requirement already satisfied, but in your system, as you're newly installing it, you should get successfully installed. Okay. Once your MySQL connector Python has been successfully installed, now you can launch a Jupyter notebooks and we can start connecting your Python to your database and do all the CRUD operations, all the database operations with your Python. Okay, so let's start that. First, let us. Okay, so this is my notebook. So already we have the SQL notebook with some commands already presented. So already I've shared this particular notebook in the resources. You can have a look into that. Okay. So in the very first step of this, I'm starting with importing the MySQL connector. So you can simply say it as import MySQL connector as M. Just M is a sample alias name. You can, in the place of M, you can choose anything. Okay. So I'm just saying import MySQL dot connector as M. Okay. So once I just said this, it will just import the connector, MySQL connector. Then the next step is to connect to the database. Okay. Connect to the database. So because right now the main motto here right now is, so you have a database management system hosted in your local right now. Okay. So you have a MySQL database management. Let's assume this is your MySQL database management system. Okay. MySQL DBMS. And this is your entire desktop. Okay. Your entire system. Let's assume this is your entire system. In that you have your database management system. Okay. You have your MySQL database management system. And let's assume here you have you're running your Python codes. Okay. You're running your Python codes here. So basically now here Python is like a client right now. Python is like a client, and already in MySQL server, it's like a server right now where it is hosted, where you have hosted locally. You have hosted your MySQL server locally. So the main point here is you have to connect your Python client to your DBMS, to your MySQL server, and do all the operations, all the queries and all those things. So in order to do this, in order to connect here, in order to connect in this particular library itself, in this particular library which we are using MySQL connector, we have a function called as connect. Okay, that particular connect function will be helping us to connect your database. Okay, it will be helping us to connect to your Python to your database management system. Okay, so let's see how can we do that. So in this particular connect function, we have to give some parameters. First one is the host. Host indicates where exactly your database is hosted. Okay, so which database you want to connect. See guys, in general, in future, when you are working in a company or when you are working with any client or working with any kind of management, sometimes what happens is you'll be getting a database which is present in some other location, like some other server. Okay, so when you want to connect to that particular database, you have to use this particular host as a parameter. So in this particular host, basically you have to give a IP address. Okay, you have to give a IP address. When I say IP address, the URL, the URL, okay, URL or the IP address. It's like an address. Like an address in order to connect to that particular specific database. Okay. So host, where is your database hosted? Right now, as we are locally working in our system, and then in our database also, our database is also present in our local system. So you can use you can use it as localhost. Localhost means it is locally hosted. So it's a locally hosted server, okay, in your system. Okay. So you're connecting your Python to the locally hosted MySQL server right now. Okay. Then after you have given the address, you have to give the credentials, because anyone cannot connect, everyone cannot connect to your database, right? So you need to have some credentials. Like for example, if I know the IP address, even if I don't know, if the credentials are blank, then even I can also connect, everyone connect to the particular database. So in order to avoid that, we'll be having some credentials. I guess if you remember in the last video, when we were configuring the MySQL, we were giving some credentials. So exactly same credentials you have to give here. First one is a username. Username will be root. Root indicates the super user, super admin user. Of course, apart from super admin, you can create a child users also, like non-admin users with some permissions. Like if you want to give some permissions, like you want to give only read operation permission or a write operation permission or a specific operation permission, you can do that. But right now, we are not focusing on that right now. But let's start with a root user. Okay, root user who is actually having the admin permissions. Then what is a password for that particular user? So guys, whatever password you have given while configuring the MySQL in the last video, exactly same password you have to give it here. So I give it as 12345 6. I'm giving here whatever password you gave, you use that particular password. So root is your username and password is your respective password you are given while configuring. And third one is the port. The port is nothing but the default port will be 3306. Why we use port? Because in general, guys, you might have multiple databases in your system itself. See, let's assume you have your system. Now, right now we are working with MySQL database management system. But for example, if you are having MariaDB or any other Oracle or some other database in your system, so your port number will be helping us to decide which database you have to connect. For example, now for MySQL, you have given the port by default. If you just look at the configuration of yesterday's video, the port number was 3306. Now in future you will be installing another database management system, then the port number may be 3308. So if you want your Python to connect, to this particular database, you have to use port number as 3306. If you want the Python to connect to your other database management system, you have to use this particular port number. So port number tells us which database management, which server, which database management you want to serve, you want to connect. Okay. So guys, it's like you can assume like a flat address. So just assume that I want to send you a post. Okay, I want to send some kind of goodies to you. Okay. So if I want to send goodies to you, I'll be using something called as address, right? You will be having some address. In order to send some post or something, I'll be using address. Okay. So I'll get your address, I'll write your address and send to you. But you are living in an apartment, let's assume. Okay. You are living in an apartment, and in apartment we have multiple flats. How will your address, how will your post will reach to your apartment, to your respective flat? Because in your apartment you'll be having every flat, right? Every flat will be having one number, one specific number called as flat number. So in your apartment, apartment is an entire house, entire entity, and that you're having multiple flats. In the same way, in your system, you can have multiple databases. In order to connect to the specific database management system, you can use this. Okay, cool. So in this way, we have understood what exactly is port. So in this way, by using this particular parameters called as host, user, and port number, we are connecting to that particular MySQL server. Okay, MySQL server. Cool. So when you run this particular code, guys, if you don't get any error, that means that you are successfully connected to your database server. Okay, there is no issue. You are able to, your Python is successfully connected to your database server. Okay. Then if you just print this, you'll be getting this particular MySQL connection, which is basically a connection object. So basically your whatever connected, once you have connected your Python to your database, you will be having a connection object given to us, and that is nothing but your connection object, which will be helping us to do all the operations, all the database operations. Okay, so you got your connection object. Cool. So the very first step is done, means you have connected to your Python to your database management system DBMS. Our next step is to do some operations, do some database operations. Okay, so in order to do some database operations, I already told you that we will be using some language, right? We use some language, and that is called as SQL, query language, right? So we understood that we will be using something called as SQL, and SQL is basically a query language. It's a query language used to perform all the database operations. The same SQL we'll be using Python also. In Python, we will be using SQL queries in order to do all the operations. But in order to run SQL queries in Python, you need something called as cursor. Okay, we need something called as cursor in order to do SQL operations. But what exactly is a cursor? I'll just show a simple example. Let's assume I'm opening a notepad. Okay, I'm opening a notepad. The moment I open a notepad, am I getting a cursor here? Yes. And with help of cursor, what I can do, I can type, right? I can just type whatever I want in this particular notepad. Some random text I've typed right now. I've typed this particular random text because I'm having a cursor, and with help of the cursor. Exactly same way, if I want to do some SQL queries, if I want to write SQL queries and do the SQL operations, I need something called as cursor, cursor of the database in order to do that. So how do you get the cursor? Very simple. So once you go back to this, once you got the my connection object, we have a function called as dot cursor. My connection, in the connection object, we have something called as cursor. Okay, we have an inbuilt function called as cursor. So you can use this particular cursor to execute SQL queries. So mainly the main use of cursor to execute the SQL queries. Okay, cool. So that particular cursor, I'm taking in a variable called as my underscore cursor, just a simple random variable. Whatever variable name you want to give, you can give that. But I've taken a variable name called as my cursor. So once you have get the cursor, you will be getting the cursor object here. That will be helping us to run all the SQL queries. Okay. So once you got the cursor object, you can start implementing your stuff. Okay. So let's start with first. Already yesterday, if you remember, in our previous session, our previous video, we have seen how to show the databases, right? We have used a command called as show databases. So let's use the same show databases command, and let's try to list the databases here. Okay. So let me do that right now. So what you can do is, in order to run the query, you can just simply say my cursor, we have a function called as inbuilt function called as execute. Okay, we have an inbuilt function called as execute in cursor. We'll be using this particular execute function in order to execute the queries. Okay, execute function. Okay, in this, what we should do is, we can give the SQL query. And what is our SQL query? Our SQL query is to show the data, right? Show the databases. Okay, so let me write the heading here saying it as show databases. I want to show the databases. Okay, list of databases present in my uh, my DBS management system, because I told you that in your DBMS you can have multiple databases. So I want to show that. So you can simply say show databases. Okay, and here we need to do no need to use any semicolon right now. So directly we can say show databases, and we'll run this. Okay, we'll run this. So I've run this, but you can clearly see that I'm not getting any output. Why? Because here what happens here is, it will just execute the query, but if you want to see the result, you should use another function. So you're doing a read operation, right? I'm doing a read operation. So when I'm doing a read operation, I'm trying to read, I'm trying to read the information from the server. Okay, so it will execute it. But if you want to see this, whenever you're doing any read operation, not only for show databases, whenever you're doing any read operation in MySQL connector, you have to use a function called as fetch all. Okay, fetch all. It's a function in order to see all the results given by the SQL, okay, MySQL data, your database management system, okay. So you can just say fetch all, and you can see it is showing all the results. And if I just look at this, these results will be in the form of a list of tuples, okay, and you can see all the databases, right? Whatever databases we have seen, these are the inbuilt databases. We have not created this. These are inbuilt databases you get once you install your MySQL database, MySQL server. You'll be getting these inbuilt databases. These are just databases to store some information about your software itself, about your MySQL server itself, okay. So in this way, you have run a simple query right now, and you're able to get the databases, list of databases right, like this. Apart from fetch all, you also have something called as fetch one. Okay, fetch one to fetch only one. Okay, so again, I'm executing this and say we'll be getting the first one, fetch one, like that. So, but we always use fetch all in most of the cases. Okay, let me run this again. Cool. In this way, I'm getting fetch all. Cool. So in this way, you have executed the first query, that is fetch of show databases, and you got the data. Now I want to create a database. Okay, I want to create a database in my database management system. So in order to create a database, guys, we have some command. Before that, I want to show you. I want to show you this PDF. Okay, which I have created. Basically, guys, this particular PDF I've already uh, posted in the resources. So you can just check out the resources and get this particular PDF, okay, where we have all the, not all, but most of the important commands, okay, for SQL, especially which does all the CRUD operations, create, read, update, delete, okay. All the CRUD operations, if you want to do, you can use this particular PDF, which has all the most important queries and their respective examples. I've also given examples in some of the queries. You can just use this as a handy, like a notes, in order to run queries and use queries, okay. So in this, as our first step is to create database, you can see we have the very first step. We can use this particular command for creating database. So this is the command, guys, create database and the database name, whatever name you want to give to your database, okay. If you just carefully observe here, guys, create database is actually a keyword, and database name means the name given by the user, whatever name you want to give to create a database. And one more thing you have to see, that is these keywords are not case sensitive. Okay, of course the name is case sensitive. For example, if you given uppercase mydb, and in future if you say lowercase mydb, it will not work. The names are case sensitive, but the keywords are not case sensitive in SQL. Okay, either you can go with uppercase create database, something like this, and the lowercase, or you can go with the lowercase create database like this. It's not case sensitive. That is first thing. And second thing is, you can see in this particular PDF, I've mentioned all the keywords in a blue color. So in that way, you can differentiate the keywords. Okay. So non-keywords like names and all those things is mentioned in black, and the keywords are mentioned in blue. So you can use that in order to differentiate what is a keyword and what is not a keyword. Okay. So in that way, you can just use this particular these things and start with that. So let's start with create database space database name. So you can see already I'm running this. I'm just saying my cursor already dot execute, as we know that execute is to run SQL query. Execute is a function. So it's an inbuilt function in my cursor, and I'm saying create database, and my database name I'm right now giving it as mydb. You can give any name. I'm just giving it as mydb. Okay, cool. So now when I run this, if you don't get any error, guys, your query has been successfully executed. uh, Perfect. Now the point is, right now whatever operation I've done, that is create database, that's a write operation, not a read operation. So as I'm doing a write operation, we don't need to do any kind of fetch all, because it will not return anything. It will not return anything. It's just a simple write operation. Now if you want to see whether your database has been successfully created or not, or if you want to show the list of databases, again I'm showing the databases here. Again I'm doing a read query and showing the list of databases. And you can see here, when I say fetch all, you can see MyDB listed here. So see, previously there is no MyDB here. The moment I create my database here, you can see MyDB. So successfully, congratulations, successfully you have created a database in your DBMS, in your database management system. Cool. Now, once you have created a database, you want to do some operations. What kind of operations? As we are discussing from first, you want to do CRUD operations. Ultimately, I want to do CRUD operation. What is meant by CRUD? Create, read, update, and delete, right? I want to do these particular operations right now with my database. Now, as we want to do these particular CRUD operations, we clearly know that in general, you will be having a database management system like this. And in this database management system, you'll be having multiple databases, right? You'll be having multiple databases, DB1 and DB2. Right now, I'll call this DB1 as my DB, whichever I just created. And these are other databases. We are not worried about that. Now, if I want to insert some data or I want to add some data into the my DB, I should add in the form of tables, right? I should add in the form of tables. So the very first thing I should do is, in order to do some operation, in order to insert some data into this, I should create something called as tables. I should create something called as tables, and with help of tables only I can actually insert the data and do all the other operations. So how do we insert the data? How do we create tables? But before creating tables, we have to do one more thing. Then we'll go and create a table. Okay. Now the point is, I want to work with database called as MyDB, right? See now, guys, your Python, whatever Python programming, whatever Python connection object you're having right now, that is my connection object. This particular connection object or this particular cursor right now, this particular connection object is connected to your entire database management system. Okay, right now, this is one thing you have to understand here. Let's assume this is your DBMS. This is your DBMS, and right now this is your Python. Let's assume this is your Python. And your Python code is right now connected to it is pointing to the entire database management system. But my goal is right now is, I have created a database called as MyDB. In this DBMS, I have created a database called as MyDB, and I want to work with this my database right now, MyDB only right now. So what you should do is, you should make your Python to connect to MyDB, to point to MyDB, to connect to only MyDB, such that you can create tables and insert data, delete data, all the operations you can do. But in order to do that, first you have to connect to MyDB, to specific database. Right now you're connected to, you're pointing to entire database management system. Now you have to connect to specific DB. Specific DB. How do I do that? See, already we know how to connect to your entire database by using the connect function, right? But what if I want to connect to specific database? It is very simple. You can use the same connect function itself, exactly same thing. You can use the exact same code, but the only difference is you have to add a extra parameter. What is that? Okay. So let me show you how to connect to specific database. So here you can see. So before creating a table, you can see I'm connecting to specific database. How do I connect? You can use exactly same code, m.connect, localhost, user, root, password is 123456, port is same. And here the extra parameter will be coming, that is database. The extra parameter is database, means which database you want to connect. So I want to connect to a database called as MyDB. So I have to mention this. So when you connect like this, what happens is this operation you have established, this particular connection you have established means you are connecting to a Python to the specific DB, MyDB. Okay. So in this way, you can give your specific database, and you'll be getting the respective connection object, which is pointing to that particular specific MyDB. Okay. Cool. Now, once you have pointed to specific MyDB, you can get the cursor, because I have to get the updated cursor, right? Because now I'm pointing to specific DB. Okay. So I'm getting the updated cursor. Done. So these particular two steps, what it will do is, it will connect to the specific DB and the cursor, and it will be getting the cursor of specific DB. Now I can start creating a table. I can start creating a table. Create a table. So now if I want to create a table, how do I create it? What is the syntax for that? So let's see the first the syntax of creating a table, then we'll proceed creating a table. So you can see, guys, this is the syntax of creating a table. Let me explain the syntax first, and then we'll go to our Python code and do that. Okay. So in order to create a table, the syntax is very simple. Create, table, table. These two are keywords. Okay. Create table and the table name, whatever table name you want to give. So basically, guys, in a single project, you'll be having multiple tables, right? Multiple type of data. So for every table, you have to give a table name, unique table name in the database. So you have to give a table name here, and then you have to start with start with the brackets and end the brackets here, and here you have to mention the respective columns. So already I told you that we are working with a structured data. When I say structured data, what do I mean by that? Means you'll be working with a data where the schema is already defined and you cannot, you cannot modify. You can modify, but the thing is you should bind to that particular schema. So this data type is one of the schema here. Means once you mention that this particular column should store integer. You can only store integer. You cannot store string, or you cannot store boolean, or you cannot store, of course, you can store boolean if it is 0 or 1, but you cannot store float, or you cannot store other kinds of data types. So if you say integer, you can store only integer. So in that way, first itself, you have to mention the constraints, the information of your columns. Okay, so it is something like this: create table. For example, the table name is my table, let's assume, and in this I want two columns, employee id and employee name. So I'm creating like this: employee id space integer and employee name comma text. So column and the respective data type, and comma separated, you have to give a comma, and you can create a number of columns whatever you want. So I'm telling that this is my table and the respective columns in that particular table. So you know that, right? Table means rows and columns. So first I have to mention the columns and the respective data type. Okay. Now I'll also show you guys what are the list of data types present in SQL. You can use that image in order to refer the data types whenever you are giving the specific data type to a specific column. So have a look at this particular image, guys. In this particular image, we have all the types, SQL data types here, you can see. So we have numeric. If you want to store a numerical data, for example, you can use this data types like bit, tiny int. Tiny int means we'll be having a smaller range, small int, big int with a higher range, decimal, numeric, float. So depending upon, so every data type has its own constraints and its properties. You can explore that. So depending upon whatever way you want to store, you can use this particular data types for storing numerical data. Whereas if you want to store date and time, you can use this particular data type. If you want to store string data, that is your text data, you can use this char, varchar max. Whenever you are using varchar, guys, you have to use something called as max. Varchar stands for variable character, okay, which is having different character length. Okay, and here you have to use something called as maximum length. Here, whenever you're using varchar, you have to use maximum. It indicates that your characters will be of that particular maximum length. It will not go beyond that particular maximum length. Okay, it's a maximum length, and the text with any length. Okay, then Unicode character, you can use this. Binary, if you want to store any binary kind of image or var binary or something like that, you can use this binary data, basically binary data in the form of bytes format. And other kind of, you also have other kind of data types like blob, XML, JSON. Blob is for again image. JSON, JSON structure or XML. These are the other kinds of data types present. So these are the list of data types present in SQL. So depending upon whatever data you want to store. Apart from this, you also have Boolean. Boolean and tiny int are same, guys. Boolean in the sense true or false, right? And you know clearly that true indicates 1 and false indicates 0. That comes under tiny int itself. Okay, so these are the list of data types present. Depending upon whatever you want to store, you can actually give the respective uh, data types while creating the column. Okay, so now let's go back and create a table and see how can we use this. Okay, so in order to create a table, you can just simply say my cursor dot execute. As usual, I'm getting the my cursor object and I'm saying create table. I'm creating a table called as employee data to store my employee information. So employee data. In that employee data is my table name. Okay, create table name, employee data is my table name, and I'm starting the brackets. You can see these particular braces, whatever I'm having, I'm starting that to mention my column names. Okay, so I'm starting this, and my first column is employee ID, and I'm saying that it is of type integer. Okay, employee ID of type integer. Next, employee name of type text. Okay, string data we can assume. You can also give varchar here. If you want to give varchar, you can say like this, varchar, and you have to mention how many number of characters you want to store maximum. Maybe I'll say that, okay, name might be maximum 50 characters. So I'll just 50, that's it. Okay, or maybe 100 like that. So I'm giving 100. So varchar 100. Next, employee salary. So I want to store the employee salary, and obviously we know employee salary is float. Then marriage status, whether he has married or not. So I'm giving it as Boolean. Okay, you have to mention entire Boolean, not bool. because we are working with SQL, you have to mention entire boolean, not BOLL will not work like Python. Okay, marriage status, true or false, and the blood group of the employee, that is text. So you can see almost most of the important data types are covered in this particular table itself. Integer, varchar, and float, boolean, text, and all those things. So once you run this, you will be getting a table will be created. Okay, a table will be created. So in this way, successfully you have created the table. But what if I want to show the table? I want to show the list of tables present in my database. So what you can do is exactly same thing you can do. Like how did we run show databases? Like this you can do show tables. Okay, you can simply say show tables. If I say show tables, it will be showing the list of tables. But obviously, you know, right, we are doing a read operation here. So whenever you're doing a read operation, you have to use fetch all, right? Because to read the data. So let me say first run the show tables command and say fetch all. So you can see it is showing the tables, and if you observe here, we have only one table that is called as my employee data. That's it. We don't have another table because just now we have created this particular table and database. So in this particular database, we have only one table that is called as employee data. Cool. Now, once we have done creating a table, we can start inserting some data into the table, right? I want to insert some data into the table. So how do we insert? Again, let's go back to the PDF and see the syntax. Okay. So if we want to insert the data into a table, you can just use this particular command. Okay. You can simply say insert into, insert into is a keyword. Okay. Insert into is a keyword. Okay. And the respective table name, whichever table you want to insert the data. Okay. Respective table name, and in which columns you want to insert, what columns, what values you want to insert. So respective columns and respective values. Okay. Apart from this, you can also follow this particular syntax also. Insert into table name, and without giving columns also you can do this. But whenever you're doing in this way, you have to mention all the values. Here, if you skip a column also, it will work because it will automatically add null value. But if you, in this case, it will not work. You have to give all the columns. Okay. So let us follow this particular step by giving respective columns and the respective values. Means, for example, column 1, I want to store this particular value. Column 2, I want to store this particular value. Column 3, I want to store this particular value. So like this, you can give the columns and the respective values. Values is the keyword. Okay. Values is a keyword. Values space, you have to start the brackets and give the values. Okay. So let's see how can we give that. So you can see here already I've done that here. You can see first you should say insert into employee data. So as we are using employee data is your table name. So insert into employee data. Then give your columns, which are the columns you want to give it. So employee ID, employee name, employee salary, marriage status, and employee blood group. Okay. So first I'm giving the respective values. Values is a keyword. Okay. So in the employee ID, I want to store 1. First employee ID is 1, and employee name is Abhishek, just giving a random name. Employee salary is some 60,000.5, something like that. And then the marriage status, whether he has married or not. So I'm giving it as false. And because you know, right, it is boolean, right? It is boolean, so false. And O positive, that is your blood group. Okay. So I'm just giving all the respective constant like employee ID, employee name, employee salary, marriage status, and the employee blood group. Okay. So when I run this command, it should insert the this particular data into the employee data table. So if I don't get any error, it has successfully installed. So you can see here, when I'm doing a write operation, I'm not calling fetch all. When I'm doing read operation only, I'm calling the fetch all. Okay, cool. So your data has been successfully inserted into the table. But I want to see the data, what has been inserted, how it has been inserted. Okay. To see the data, you can use another query. Let's see how to read the data from the table. Now we have learned about how to create a table, insert data into table. Now let's see how to read the data from the table. So if you want to read the data from the table, you can use this particular query. You can use this particular keyword called as select. Okay. We'll be using this particular keyword called as select. Okay. So you can simply say select star. Star indicates everything, guys. Whenever you are giving star here, it indicates everything. When I say everything, see, if you remember, when you're discussing about libraries, I told about something called as import star, right? From specific library, from time import star. If you remember, when you're discussing about libraries, exactly same thing we can use here. Star indicates everything. When I say from time import star means what? Star indicates everything, right? Exactly same way here also. Whenever I mention star here, it indicates everything. I want to import everything from this particular database star. Okay, all columns, every column, everything. Okay, everything. So now let's use this particular command right now and get the data, whatever information you have in the table, in that particular table. Let's get that table information. Okay. So how do you run this? As usual, again, you can use this my cursor object. You can simply say my cursor dot execute select star from employee data. So star is nothing but your key. Star is nothing but everything. Select is your keyword. From is your keyword. Employee data is your key. Employee data is your name, not keyword. So let me run this. As you know that when you run this, nothing will happen. You'll not get any output here because it's a read query. Whenever you're doing a read query, what you have to use? Obviously, fetch all. Yes. So you have to use something called as fetch all. So let me run this my cursor dot fetch all. So when I say my cursor dot fetch all, you can see you got one row inserted in your table. This is your first row inserted in your table, which has employee ID, your name, salary, and you can see it is the boolean value whatever you have inserted marriage status is 0. Why? Because already I told you that whenever you are inserting a boolean, it will be a tiny int. It will be like a tiny int, integer only. Means even though you store false or true, even though you give false or true, here I given false, so it is converted into 0 or 1. So 0 indicates false and 1 indicates true. Okay, cool. And then O positive is your blood group. So in this way, all your information has been properly inserted. So like this, you can insert a specific information into the particular data into the table. Another point is, what if I'm having multiple rows? Let's assume I'm getting multiple information from somewhere, and my job is to insert the data. See, now you're doing a job of a database administrator, right? Or database, or you're trying to get the data and trying to insert some information. Okay. Now you got multiple employees information. Okay, I want to insert at a single go. How do I do that? It's very simple. So you have to create the structure something like this, guys. In order to create multiple data, you have to create a structure like this. You have to create a list of tuples. You can see this, right? Whenever you're getting the result, you're getting the list of tuples. Exactly same way you have to create a list of multiple tuples. You'll be having a list. In that you have to have multiple tuples. Each tuple will be having each employee's information. You can see. Like the employee name, salary, married or not, and the respective blood group. Like this, I'm having for every employee with different names and different employee IDs. Okay. And one more problem in this, one more thing you can see here, that employee ID Suresh and employee name Rajesh are having same employee ID. Okay. I've wantedly kept this. Let's see what happens here. Okay. So first let me insert this multiple values at a single go. Okay. So first I'm creating a variable called as values or value, whatever variable you want to take, you can take it. And here I'm giving the list of information I want to send added. Okay. List of rows basically. Each tuple will be a row. Okay. Then I have to write a SQL query. You can see these your values will be something like this. Now I should write a SQL query. To insert the data. So so we can simply say SQL is equal to some SQL query, random whatever SQL query, like this insert data insert into employee data and the respective columns, employee ID, employee name, employee salary, marriage status, employee blood group, and the respective values. Right now I'm not giving the values here because I'm getting the values from this particular value information. So I'm giving like a formatting option, like percentile s, percentile s. It's like a formatting option. I'm telling that it will be inserted for a few in the future. Then I'll run this. In now when I want to insert multiple data, guys, I'll be using a command called as execute many. Okay, we have a inbuilt function called as, like till now we were using something called as execute, right? Execute for single operation. But when you want to insert multiple rows at a single go, then you can use something called as execute many. So you can simply say my cursor dot execute many. In this you have to give two parameters. First parameter is the operation, that is your SQL query. I'm giving that here, and the respective values you want to insert. Okay, the sequential parameters, that is respective values you want to insert in a sequence in the value. So internally what happens is it will insert one by one sequentially, and you are having a entire data. So let me run this. Cool. Now you can see your multiple rows has been inserted successfully. If you want to check it, you can just simply say select star from employee data again. So again, you can see I'm reading the data. You know to check it, and you can see at a single go, you can see multiple rows has been inserted. Previously, I'm having only one row, but the moment I say again select star from employee data and fetch all, multiple rows has been done. So what I've done, first I've taken a values of list of tuples. Then I'm inserting the employee data here like this by giving formatting operations. Then I'm using something called as execute many in order to run this. And then after that, I'm just checking the data and you can see successfully your data will be, your data has been inserted. But the problem here is you can clearly see that can a employee, a single employee, can two employees have same employee ID? Obviously no. But if we just look at this, my database is allowing that, right? My table is allowing that. My table is allowing two duplicate employee IDs basically, which is not generally possible. Okay, so this is a wrong way, right? We should do something for this. To avoid this particular problem, what we should do is we should use something called as constraints right now. So right now, whatever database you have created, that's very good. Table, whatever created, that's particularly, that's fine. But what if you want to add some extra constraints? Like for example, I want to say employee ID should be not duplicate, it should be unique, or employee name should not be null, something like that. Then what we can do is you should create the database with constraints. So how to create a database with constraint? We call it as constraints. What is the constraint? Conditions, specific conditions, or we can say specific rules, we can say, or specific limitations. Okay. So how do we create a database with constraints? So you can do like this. These are the list of constraints we're having, guys. You can explore this. Right now, let's focus on few constraints. How do we create a database with table with constraints? Means very simple. Create table. So exactly same syntax, whatever you're using here, exactly same syntax. The only difference here is you start with create table, table name. You'll be giving a table name. Open your braces, column, respective data type, and after data type. Here we have given empty, right? There is nothing after data type. But here you have to give the specific constraint. Which constraint you want to give. So if I say constraint, we'll be having so many constraints here, like not null. Not null ensures that that column will not have null value. So if you give not null, that particular column will not have null value. It will ensure that whenever you're inserting the data, you should compulsory mention that particular column, or else it will not allow. Compulsory should have that particular column information. Next, unique. This is what we need, right? Unique ensures that all values in a column are different, means they are unique in nature. And there is a very important constraint that is called as primary key. It's a combination of not null and unique. So basically, guys, primary key, why it is given as primary key? What is the use of primary key means? See, whenever you're using tables and whenever you're using SQL, guys, you need to do a lot of fetching operations, reading operations, writing operations. There should be in a specific table, there should be a primary key, very important key, which is very important to in order to do all the operations. And for example, in our employee data, employee ID is our primary key actually. When I say primary key, that is a important information, because without employee ID, we cannot do any other operations. So primary key, and moreover, you will be having only one primary key. So that particular primary key will be helpful a lot and lot. Okay. So generally, guys, primary key is a combination of not null and unique. So right now, I want employee ID as not null, because every employee ID should have the employee. Every employee should have the employee ID for sure. So it should not be null, and it should be unique in nature, both. So I can give employee ID as primary key. If I put only unique, what happens is it will allow not null values also. So I should not do that. Okay. Then check. Then we have a constraint called as check. We will be checking for a specific condition. For example, I'll just say my employees are having compulsory salaries above 50,000 only. My employees will not have salary below 50,000 at all. So that particular condition I can specify. And the next one is default. Default means, for example, let's assume you're not inserting any value. Instead of inserting a null value, it will be putting a default value. For example, let's assume you're not inserting a employee location, okay, or employee salary of a particular employee. You're not inserting it. You're not giving by inserting. If you mention default here, then what happens is that particular default value will be automatically inserted, will automatically given instead of null values like that. By default, it is null, but you can give any value, or you can give any value in this particular things. Like this, we have some constraints, guys. You can use this particular constraints to make your table more better and more perfect. So let me use this particular constraints and create a table right now by using your same Python. Okay. So I'm just scrolling down. And here I'm creating a table with constraints. So you can see I'm creating another table called as employee data 2. I don't want to disturb my previous table. Let it be as it is. I'm creating a one more table called as employee data 2. That is in my database itself. So I'm creating create table employee data underscore 2. And here you can see I'm giving some constraints. So what I'm saying here is employee ID integer. And there is also one more constraint which I forgot to tell you, that is auto increment. What is meant by auto increment? That this is also one of the you can also keep without auto increment also you can work. Yes, you can simply say primary key as you should mention something like this. Whenever you're using primary key, you have to mention something like this. But what is the use of auto increment, right? Whenever what is the use of auto increment means, I'll let you know. For example, let's assume your employee ID like this. Okay. Today you're storing your employee ID something like this with 1. Tomorrow I'm showing one more employee ID. Automatically will be given as 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. So it will automatically increment the values from your previous values. Okay. So generally a lot of companies will follow auto increment methods. So I'm just using auto increment here, another constraint kind of thing. Auto increment with primary key. I'm making my employee ID as primary key. So you cannot change it. I mean, you cannot modify this. We cannot uh, it can be unique. It can be unique and not null. That is what I can say. Next, employee name as text and not null, because employee name should also be not null, right? And employee salary float, marriage status boolean, exactly same way. The only thing is I'm adding some extra constraints here to make my thing more better way. Let me remove this auto increment for now. Okay, let me remove this particular auto increment and only put primary key for now. Only put primary key for now, and let's see what happens. Okay. Cool. So whenever I'm giving primary key, guys, we should give compulsory something like this employee ID in. We should mention comma primary key, which is a primary key. Employee ID is a primary key. So syntax for primary key is slightly different. Whereas for not null, we can directly say like this employee name text not null. But for primary key, you have to mention something like this primary key or something like this. Okay. I'm not giving any auto increment right now, but you can try auto increment also. Okay. Now let's see how to insert the data with constraints. So now what I will do is I will make Rajesh and Suresh same employee ID. I'll not differ the employee ID. I'll make same employee ID for Rajesh and Suresh. And let's see what happens this time when I'm inserting the data. Okay. So I'm using the values as usual, insert the data into the employee data. And let me execute this execute mini command. Okay. Now you can see here, I got this error. Now I got an error saying that duplicate entry 60 for key employee data to primary, because you mentioned your employee ID as primary, right? While creating the database, while creating the table, sorry, you mentioned that your employee ID is a primary key, means it should be unique and not null. So whenever you're giving a duplicate value like 60 here, it will be throwing an error saying that this is not allowed, duplicate entry. So now what we should do is let me change this to 61. Let me change it to 61 employee ID. So like this, it will not allow duplicate values. So it will be more safer. So now let's see, now it has allowed, now it has executed, and now you can see run this. Perfect. So you can see you got your all your respective employees stored in employee data also. So like this, guys, you can give your constraints whenever you're inserting the data. So it will be helpful for allowing the user to, it will be helpful for making your table more better way and not inserting some duplicate values or not null values or something like that. Okay.